Welcome back to another Strategoi video. Ryan here, catching up on some very belated tournament reports that we've had due for the past few months. This time, we're caught up, well, with this video, after this video, we'll be caught up till September. Yeah, this will cover everything leading up to the beginning of October. And there was just one tournament, I believe, that I was taking a part in September, and that was the yearly Alliance Open Team Championships team tournament here that we host, that Tom Makis, host of also AOS Worlds for this coming year and the past year. He hosts this tournament as well. It's kind of our version of prepping for Worlds. But anyway, we'll talk more about that later. But this will get us caught up to that. And then we had another one-day teams tournament that Nick, myself, Tom, and our buddy Henry did in Bruges. That'll be the next one that we end up covering. So, and then there's a number, just week after week I had tournaments. So hopefully we'll catch up with these without bombarding you guys with too many tournament reports. You know, seeing as we're behind and I do want to cover all this stuff, let's just get to it. In the meantime, though, while I'm thinking about it, go ahead and hit that like, share, subscribe, all the good YouTube stuff to keep spreading the message of the kind of content we're putting out here, if you're a fan, of course. Hopefully you're liking what we're doing. Let us know if there's something else you'd like to see on the channel that we cover, or if there's something else we can do to help make your viewership experience as good as possible. I'm not so great about putting timestamps in here, but I'm trying to get better about that. So for those of you out there that keep requesting timestamps, my apologies, and we'll try to be better. Okay, so moving on. We're going to cover the tournament in general, then some army lists, which in this case I suppose is mine, but I'm also going to talk about what was on our team's roster, then our matchups, and then a conclusion. So, as always, we cover the rules pack or the setup of the tournament, and then the meta in general, and then kind of my personal experience. I wanted to have one of my teammates, co-captain, if you want to call him that, because he was my captain at the Osnabrück 8-man team tournament that we had about, I guess that was a couple months before Worlds. I think it was in March. Alex, super sweet guy, and I'd played with him kind of as filling in as a merc, I guess, for his team in Osnabrück, and then after Worlds, we kind of tried to get him involved, and the story of how my team got put together is a long one. Maybe I'll go into that later, but the short version is I ended up getting to play with Alex again, and that was really cool. So anyway, let's get into that, and I'll talk a little bit more about the team later. So, the rules pack. This time we had 14 teams of 5 players each. I think last year was 18 teams of 4 players. So, that comes out to more players, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. We lost 4 teams, but we gained a player for each of the teams. So, no, that's less players, right? Yeah, that's less players. In any case, still a decent amount of people here. It was 5 games, 3 hours and 15 minutes each. That's because the extra 15 minutes are needed for doing pairings. If you've been following or you had followed any of our Worlds team coverage, you'll know that, pairings is a complicated process, and it'd probably be good to do like a video on pairings and the various pairing systems you see out there. But 15 minutes can actually, end up being kind of tight, even though, you'd think that's quite a bit of time. When you sit down, get everyone ready to go, the team captain and the coach or one of the advising players there, in this case it was Alex for myself, and I was taking a stab at being the captain. He and I would sit there and try to make the best decisions for which armies to put down for protector and I guess defender. Is that what we were calling it? Protector and invader, I think, is what we changed it to this time, just to make it not overlap with attacker or defender for like a turn priority. But in any case, it ended up sometimes taking the whole 15 minutes, so it is definitely needed. At this tournament, at Worlds this past year, we had it was 3 days of 2 games apiece, and this was a normal 2-day tournament, 3 games, 2 games. But there were at Worlds we had every round had 4 different missions possible, and so that meant that we had some overlap with the missions. I think, yeah, that meant that we had 2 mini cycles at Worlds. The first half of the tournament for the first 3 rounds got through all 12 of the missions, and then the back half repeated that. At this time, we did 2 battle plans per round, and of course, times 5 rounds, so that's 10 out of 12 of the missions, which leads me to the next line there. The missions, we did all of them but Frigid Zephyr, which is the one where you can't see outside of 12 inches until the squall dissipates, and you can't fly. And then the ice fields, which, if I'm not mistaken, is the ones where you can't run, or when you run or charge, you have a risk of taking some mortal wounds. So those are the 2 we didn't play. I personally, on day 1, you can see what I played here, which is every step forward, limited resources, no reward without risk. And then day 2, Spring the Trap and Towers in the Tundra. But for each of those rounds, there was another mission that I could have ended up playing but didn't, because I didn't get set up on that part of the pairings process. And then scoring. Scoring per game was based on a VP differential system, as kind of always, where points, determine whether you've got what your score is. It goes from being a 10-10 for a perfect tie, or an 11-9 for being a minor victory, minor loss. And then for every, if I'm remembering the table correctly, for every 2 points you've beaten your opponent by. So if you beat them by 1 point or 2 points, then it's a 12-8. If you beat them by 3 or 4 points, then it's a 13-7, and so forth, until I think if you get 17 or more points, you max out at a 20-0, and it can't get any higher than that. Speaking of being capped, scoring per team is capped at 80 points. But think about it, we've got 5 games going on at once. If everyone 20-0'd all of their opponents, then a team could theoretically get 100 points. But to keep things a bit more competitive, so let's say like the best team in the world goes up against a super casual team that's just there to show off their models and they've never played a game in their life, okay? Let's say they all get 20-0s. That pairing, they're the only ones that got to play that army in the first round, and it could be that the other competitive teams got much more average players or not as casual players, and just it wasn't in the cards to be able to pull that kind of super swingy first round off. So then it's giving too much of a benefit to the team that just got lucky with that really big experience differential in the first round. So to kind of combat that, they make it so that if you do stomp the other team into the ground, the most you can possibly get is 80 points. So your team would get 80 points and 20 points. The losing team would get 20. But a 50-50 is a pure tie. Okay, let's move on. So the meta. It's largely very competitive, of course, because it's a teams tournament, and that's often very competitive. The countries that were represented were, of course, a number of teams from the Netherlands out of the 14 teams. Belgium had at least 2 teams, if I'm not mistaken. France had 1 team, I think. Germany, I don't know if there were multiple German teams, but my team was like 60% German, so there's at least that. There might have been another German team as well, and I believe there was a Swiss team there. We played them at the end, and I'm pretty sure I'm remembering that correctly. They're from Switzerland, not Austria, but there might have also been. There was at least 1 Austrian player that was there, but I'm a little. It's been a couple months now, so forgive me if I'm forgetting an important country that was there. We had less countries this time around. Serbia was notably there last year, which is part of my story of how I ended up on the team I was on. But that's actually where I met Serbia, the guys and lady from Serbia last year was at this event in 2022. All right, so the meta representation. Keep in mind where we are in the meta at this point, or in the cycle. This would be, of course, 3rd edition, and then the GHB that we're currently in, which is the Primal Magic Antorian Locus season. But the OBR, FAQ, and pitch battle changes either had come through but weren't legal yet, or hadn't come through yet. I don't even think they'd come through yet. So OBR is definitely as strong as it's ever been at this moment. But we had 7 Sylvaneth armies, which is really surprising. And then 7 Tzeentch armies, being the Magic season that it is. I think Tzeentch has waned a bit in the meantime, but at the time it was still pretty popular to take. And OBR was super strong. We had 6 KO lists. I was contributing one of those. And 6 Slaves lists. Varangard are just a menace in general. 5 Slaanesh armies, which is surprising because Slaanesh, I think, has really faded out of the meta at this point, but my team brought one of them, so it was definitely there. 4 Soulblight armies and 4 Khorne armies. Khorne, I think people are starting to kind of figure out how to make it work better in this. You'd think it'd be great in the anti-magic meta, but then they have sometimes a hard time with the battle tactics. So. But, there are definitely people figuring that out. And then 3 each of Stormcast gets Ogres and Big Waaagh. I didn't list anything that had representation with 2 or 1 armies, so you can just piece it together that it's 2 or 1 if they're not on this list. And, of course, taking into account the armies that were totally missing, which, as you see here, was cities. This was before the new book, of course, because the book might have actually been leaked at that point, or even I think actually the limited edition box might have already been out, but that doesn't mean that the army's legal. Fyreslayers were not there. Idoneth wasn't there. It was before the Bloodthirsty Shiver change and the points drops, if I'm not mistaken. Feck wasn't there, but of course their battle tome hasn't come out either. Bone Splitters, Crew Boys are what the next 2 mean. So even though we did have some amount of those units are in Big Waaagh lists, like the Burgog Prophet and Gobsprak in particular, we didn't have the full factions there. And then Sons, which have had a resurgence with the Army of Renown, I guess, but that wasn't in play at the time. All right, moving on. So the experience. It was very friendly despite being quite competitive, and there were definitely many meta lists. It's a great test bed for AOS Worlds. My personal experience, I ended up going 2-3 at this one, which, as I guess captain, I was often thinking about giving the more kind of sensitive to missions matchups to our 2 better armies against that, which would have been Nico from Team the Netherlands last year. Nico, his zombie spam list, and then Dietmar, his OBR list, which really kind of needed to play for specific missions more than the rest of us. And so I think I could have actually easily gotten a 3-2. There was one game that I made a stupid mistake and should have won, but it is what it is. But I'm okay with a 2-3, especially if it means getting the rest of the guys in a better place. Of course, I wish I would have done better. But the biggest takeaway for me was just being the team captain and training with kind of running the pairings matrix, analyzing all the lists, being responsible for this kind of thing, and also doing what am I trying to say here? The whole pairings kind of thing. I hadn't really gotten, the last video that we've released here was on my list building for battle tactics. I hadn't quite implemented that system yet. I did that for the next tournament. We'll be covering that in Jonas and my table talk as well, I think. But certainly kind of getting some experience thinking about what it would be like on kind of a coach or advisor kind of role as well. Our team placed 7th out of 14, so at the bottom end of the upper half, which is fine. I think, kind of spoiler alert here, but our hardest round was definitely playing against the people from Team France in round 3, and I think if we had submarined just a little more to have avoided that matchup, it would have meant a huge difference because they just flattened a lot of people. So all in all, that sometimes that's just who you get paired against makes such a huge difference. We were not ready to take on Team France, but fortunately I actually had a really lovely game. Okay, so normally I would just go to the next slide, but I'd actually like right now to go instead to the Pun site so you can see what that looks like. Here we go. Pun is the kind of list managing system. Some people are aware of Best Coast pairings, and there are some other ones that are out there, but this is the one we use in the Netherlands and for Worlds as it is. But you can see here that we've got our lists, and this is for my team. We'll go through my list later. When you submit, we do the typical War Scroll Builder list building, but then you can copy paste it instead of printing it out as like the prettier PDF look. You have more control over it, and it's in a standardized format if you do the copy paste thing by hitting the question mark and then copy paste. And then this is kind of what the output looks like. There are a couple little things that I personally am finicky about that I went back and made sure that all of us in our lists had. As you can see here, usually the output, if it's implied that there's only one model in a unit, like a hero or a single monster or something, it doesn't actually print out one time. But I really find that the way it prints out looks a lot cleaner if you put one time next to every single one, so your eye can quickly figure out which is an individual new entry. So that's one thing I like to add there. A second thing that I always add in is that the general has to be first in the list. I always want to know who someone's general is, and a lot of people just put it in whatever the order they feel like. I really think it should just become common practice that everyone puts their general first, their chosen general, I mean. But, to each their own. I often typically also put the units in the order that they cost, but this wasn't my submitted list here. This is the order that Nico did it in, and it just ended up being, I guess, in this order. I didn't move that around. But then you'll see also in the output here, often does all the battalions with asterisks, and a certain amount of asterisks at the end here that, as you can see down here, represents which battle regiment they're part of, or Antorian acolytes. So anyway, this is just giving you a sense of the output that you see here, if you're not familiar with it. And if you're not aware, at Teams tournaments, you have to have different War Scrolls and different factions. You can't have two Soulblight players, for example. So Nico went with a Virkos list here with a ton of zombies. And I'm pretty sure right after this is when the points changed and he couldn't bring zombie spam anymore. So he moved off of that in favor of Black Knights. But anyway, you can kind of get a scope of this list right here. It's basically just making those zombies as hard to kill, and board presence is just a wound soak of an army. All right, so then we had Dietmar's OBR list. He was in Null Myriad, which is still popular. 2-up spell ignore for the whole army as long as they're within range of a hero, I believe. And then he's got Catacross, the Bone Shaper, Ossifector, Archon. 6 Immortus Guard, 2 Archai, and Death Riders, and then the Endless Spell here. That was Dietmar's list. Then we had Alex, who is the co-captain that I was talking about from before, from my Osnabrück experience. He was playing Slanesh for Pretenders. He had a Keeper's Secrets as General, Sinessa, the Mask, and an Rapturous. 20 Daemonettes, 11 Seekers, or Blissbarb Archers, 5 regular Seekers, and 2 units of Fiends, plus some Endless Spells here. And, of course, the terrain feature, which you do have to mention at this level of tournament. If you don't, a lot of people won't let you bring it, even though it's implied in your battle traits, really. And then Toby, one of our other German players, was playing a Beast list, a Darkwalkers list, which I think is the teleporty one, if I'm not mistaken. Had a Doom Bull, Great Bray Shaman, Bellicor, 10 Ungors, 6 Bulgors, 20 Ungor Raiders, and some Zongor Lightened on disc in a 1-drop list. All right, so let's go back to my list. I've already talked about this. It's literally the same list I played in the last review, which was the White Scars Cities of Sigmar 2, I guess is what I called it. I think it was 2. Tournament that Nick and I spoke about recently. But I'll just go through it real quick. So this is my half meta list, which was like 15 Thunderers. That's a big part of it. Plus still some amount of the melee boat and the frigate. with the engine riggers. It was in Zilfin that made one of my boats a battle line, that made the frigate battle line. Rule of the Skies, I've got to kill all the flying behemoths and still have at least one of my boats alive at the end. It's low on total points, so I can get that Inspire and Triumph for a +1 to wound in one turn. And then you've got the kind of normal set of article, amendment, and footnote. Honors everything, if I'm not mistaken, that's the 4+ rally. And then Prosecute Wars is a 2d6 run once per turn. And then Without Our Ships is using once per game using 2 CPs on a boat. As long as your admiral's alive, you can pull that off. X-Grunstock makes my Thunderers battle line, which allows them to go to double reinforced. Celestial Burst Grenade to turn off ward saves in one shooting phase for one unit within 12 on a 2-up. Hand-carved Nullstone icon on the Chemist. Navigator has his little quasi-magic tricks of slowing down units and doing some amount of mortal wounds. Having movement is what I mean by slowing down. And the Thunderers just do what Thunderers want to do. Plus I had some Arco for screen, the engine riggers as that melee boat unit. And then when you've got the magnificent Omniscope on the frigate, it's moving up to 14 inches. Prudency shoots on the Ironclad instead of Last Word, which is like a kind of quasi, a very popular quasi Unleash Hell kind of thing. But I take Prudency shoots just in case someone does manage to kill that boat. I don't lose all the Thunderers unless they manage to also surround it entirely. But anyway, this list, like I said, went 2-3 at the tournament, but I had refined it in the meantime. I'm actually going to play it again in another team's tournament, not this list, but a more refined version of it in a team's tournament coming up, just because I think it does what you need in a team better than a lot of the other stuff I've been playing lately, which has been Sylvaneth, and I have not figured out, spoiler alert for those tournament reviews. Okay, so talking about the matchups, our first round we went against, so as you can see here, I listed the countries, and by the way, if you don't know, CH is the 2-letter country code for Switzerland, which I don't know enough to know why, but maybe that's French, I don't know. As it were, that's Switzerland at the end. So we played Dutch teams and none of these were team, the closest thing to the actual Worlds team, although the French team was, in fact. We did play other teams from our local environment here, the Netherlands. The first team had Sylvaneth, Ogres, Big Walk, Khorne, and Seraphon. This was led by Peter Soutgeest, who does the Bloodstorm events, and it had a number of my friends on that team. Then the next Dutch team was more. I think they called it Dice Daddies. This was my buddy Mathieu and a number of other guys that are super great, lovely guys. It was captained, I believe, by Roel Koemeister, who was playing Gitz. And they had Gitz, Slave, Sylvaneth, Soulblight, and Zinch. Of course, I'll talk about my individual matchups in a minute. And I meant to say the first team also was basically my team from from AOTC last year, where we all dressed up as these kind of characters from Brabant, a region in the Netherlands, a province that it's this show called New Kids, and they're kind of like this hard style kind of Dutch trailer trash kind of thing. And they kind of did that again this year, but they didn't go quite as heavy on the vibe with the wigs and stuff, but it was still the same thing. Kind of weird to play against my old team in first round. Third round was, as I mentioned, Team France, basically, which is OBR, Lumineth, Gitz, Seraphon, and Skaven. Then we played our last Dutch team of the experience. This was Team Zeeland, if I'm not mistaken. No, this was the Dementirende, which was essentially the Demented. But it was Stormcast, Zinch, Sylvaneth, Big Wa, and Nighthaunt. And then lastly, we played against, I think, the Swiss team. So Sylvaneth, Slaanesh, KO, Slaves, and OBR. Okay, so my matchups. I started by playing a tournament regular at this point. Thomas lives in the Netherlands, but he's of French descent. Super lovely guy. We've played each other at tournaments 3 times now, I believe. And so we had, he had a Sylvaneth list. It was basically kind of normal Gnarl Root magic heavy list. where he was playing a Warsong Drika and Lady of Vines, 6 swords and a Tree Lord, plus some just teleported units, of course, and just kind of other objective grabber triad type deals. I'm trying to pull up the tournament here. Let's see. Here we go. So this was he ended up getting 27 points against my 20 in every step is forward. And I missed what did I miss? I missed a reprisal attempt, but I got all my other battle tactics. He got all of his battle tactics and just had better board presence. I don't remember this game. If I'm being honest, I don't remember it all that well. I do remember he accidentally had instead of having Spell Singer, they had War Singer in there, and we just agreed that he could play Spell Singer. That was a communication problem, I think. And those two command traits are very easy to mix up. But it's always lovely playing against him, and we might have called it early and gotten a drink. I don't remember, but it was still a nice game. My second round was against the Dice Daddies guy, and this was my first time playing against another expat here in the Netherlands, Graham, who often plays cities, but he had taken on, I believe, Roel Koemeister's Zinch army. And I have to say, this is our first time actually playing against each other. I'd seen him around a lot, but I have to say he did a really good job playing Zinch for not being his own army. I went in definitely with an advantage here, but he was playing Host Arcanum where he could summon in the, summon in enough screens to kind of keep me from knocking out a lot of his stuff. He had Kairos 12 Screamers, 10 Pinks, 3 of just kind of like casters that you would bring along with Kairos. And he had some Furies, actually, and we were playing limited resources where you're tapping your own objectives, and I was actually handling this just well. I actually ended up tabling him, I'm pretty sure, by the end of the game, but because I managed to fail a couple important battle tactics, I ended up losing by 1 point, and I really shouldn't have failed a couple of those battle tactics. I don't think we ended up hitting each other. The crazy thing is I see on the list here in the app that I didn't even try for opening salvo until round 3, which means no units had died at that point. We were just avoiding each other. Which is interesting, and he only got 3 battle tactics, I only got 2, so if I had gotten that last one, it would have made a big difference. He didn't get his grand strat, and I didn't either, evidently. So it was just this crazy game, but this is the one that I think was definitely in my favor, but I just flubbed, and would have made a big difference for me, but it was still lovely playing against Graham, and really looking forward to playing some more in the future. For my third round, which was the Team France game, I didn't even finish inputting all the data here because it was like a 20-0. It was rough, but it was against. I'm going to get the guy's name wrong. He goes by kind of like a screen name of Lucrage or something like that. I forget what his actual name is, but he was actually a sweetheart. Sometimes the language barrier and the seriousness differential between the French speakers can sometimes end up making for an awkward interaction, even if the guy's super sweet. I can think of Christophe, who also plays for Team France, super sweet guy. But this game was like, I was really impressed, even though he stomped me into the ground with his OBR list. With a no reward without risk, which is the one where you could set up within combat of each other, and has 5 objectives. It was just such a rough matchup for me. With him debuffing everything, I remember I put everything I could, all the buffs I possibly could on my Thunderers, and put it all into his Immortus Guard. He had 6 Immortus Guards, 6 Stalkers, Catacross, and some other stuff. I think it only did like 2 wounds. He just had him stacked to high hell, and we called it end of turn 2, I think. It was just one of those games. It's the last game of day 1, so just pretty rough, but lovely guy. And I got to spend some quality time hanging out with their coach, Guillaume, if I'm not mistaken. Super sweet guy as well. Really got along with these guys. So I have to say, made a really strong impression on me, even though I got crushed into the ground, which is unfortunate because it's a similar thing happened with one of the players from Team Belgium. he was playing KO last year at this tournament when I was playing my Guild of Summoners, and it was the only game that was just like not fun. It was like on the stream too for Honest Wargamer Rob. So I guess I just end up playing against really competitive French-speaking dudes in round 3, like Worlds players at these AOTC events. So I want to see if I can submarine with the team a little bit better and avoid that matchup. But anyway, it was a nice round. So moving on to day 2. I ended up playing, this was again against one of the Dutch teams. I played against Jona for the first time. Super sweet guy. I think this is my favorite game of the tournament in terms of interaction. It was a close game. I won by 1 point against his big wall list on Spring the Trap, which is the one where you can teleport. Or not teleport, but reset up 3 units on round 2, but no one ever does it. He had Gobsprak, a Wargog, 12 Pigs, 10 Brutes, I think 10 Ardboys too, and support heroes. He played really well. It came down to kind of a Hail Mary at the end. I think I had to deny his Grand Strat, I had to like kill all of his battle line, which I barely managed to do at the end, and that made the difference. It was super intense. One of the more intense games I've played in a long time. And super lovely guy. Would totally love playing against him at the next tournament. But that was my first game to win. If you haven't pieced it together, at this point I'm 0-3. So I finally pull out a win here. And then the last round was against Michael from the Swiss team. We were playing Towers in the Tundra. Slanesh, I think the guy was just real exhausted. He had, if I'm not to be rude or anything, but a non-optimal Slanesh list, and I don't think he'd had a whole lot of experience against KO, and I ended up tabling him too, but I think we called it by round 3 and ended up getting a like 20-0 kind of win. It might have been a 19-1, but it was big. I don't have it in the thing here because it's we called it so early that we didn't finish him filling in the app. But it was still a nice game. He was a nice guy, and I tried to be as sweet as I could, even though KO just ended up walking all over him in this case, which is just rough. So I wanted to go back to the slides, the pun stuff, so you can see what that looks like for the team reporting. So let's go check that out. All right, so here we are with pun, and if you go back up to the top with. This is all the team names for our matchups here. And as you can see, this is how it's reported per team. We don't actually have scores per player. This is all just reported internally. But we, the first round, we went 40-60. So we were 10 points under a tie. So we gave 10 points up, too many points up. So we lost round 1. That was against my old team from the previous year. Then against Dice Daddies, even though I narrowly lost that game, we took 20 points away from them on the differential there between what a tie would end up being. So we pulled a 20 points swing there. Of course, it's a 40-point difference, but more importantly is how many points we kind of took away from them instead of everyone just walking away with a tie. That's kind of how I like to look at these things. And then when we were playing France, I'm pretty sure this was a capped result. This was not an earned 20 points. I think we actually earned less points, but because they capped us, they couldn't go any higher. So we got pity points there, if you will. Then our not closest round, against this other Dutch team, the Dementerende, we pulled, you can see that this was very close to being half-half. Was this? Yeah. Oh, no, this was our closest round, I guess. So it was a 6 point on either end of being a tie, and we kind of narrowly lost that one, which is unfortunate. And then we played the Swiss at the end here, Team BOB, where we pulled a 9-point differential there per side, winning that last round. So as a team, we ended up winning. We went 2-3 as well, but that functionally meant taking 7th place. Let's take a look at what those standings look like. So I'm taking a second here. There we go. Okay, so here's the 14 teams, And you can see kind of how this works is sometimes by the pun events, you can read into how many wins you had by looking at the first number, but that's not how it worked here. But you can see that the top three were Team Belgium, which is comprised of the actual people from the AOS Worlds Team Belgium, and then basically Team France, and then basically Team the Netherlands, which was Jeff's team, our captain Jeff Nijhoff, which also had Math Mallow, who lives in the Netherlands now. He was actually from Team Wales, but he was playing with these guys. Anyway, and then I believe this might have been an Austrian or German team here, if I'm not mistaken. It might have been Austrian, actually, now that I think about it. And then Drunken Lions actually was the team I was originally supposed to be on. Shout out to those guys for winning a painting award too, and friendliest or best sportsmanship, if I'm not mistaken. So they pulled out a number of things there. Then my buddy Mathieu's team, Rule Kuhmeister's team, Dice Daddies, and then our team here, and then some of the other teams we talked about coming down here. I believe 5D6 Mortals was one of my buddies, some of my buddies from Flanders in northern part of Belgium. And then, some of the other teams here we talked about. So this is kind of what that output looks like. If you're curious to see what the strength of schedule looked like for the top winning team, you can see that they capped out here, and then they capped out against our first opponent. This is Team Belgium. Against France, they pulled out a relatively narrow win, and then they had an even smaller win against Jeff's team. So the team Netherlands team, and then almost capping or max points at against the team that took fourth place, if I'm not mistaken. So that's kind of what that looks like. All right. And so that kind of is the conclusion, the tournament results and prizes. As far as future goals are concerned, since we're trying to catch up at this point, my goals were to keep making the KO list, more fluid for winning battle tactics and just being closer to essentially the best KO player we have in the Netherlands here, Mitchell Stahl's list. And with that, while still having some amount of my own authorship there. And that list I ended up using in the next team's tournament, which is the one-dayer that we were supposed to play with Jonas, but he got sick. And then I've referenced that we had Tom fill in for him, which we'll be covering in the next review. And then, of course, I'm going to be playing that same list, I'm pretty sure, coming up soon in Luxembourg. So look forward to a review of that one. Hopefully, I'll be caught up by the end of the year. We'll see. But anyway, that's kind of how this went. I had a great time at this tournament. It was really nice playing with my team, obviously getting to play against a number of friends and new friends alike. And it was really fun getting to learn more about being the captain and ostensibly also coach type skills by looking at all the matrices and all that kind of stuff. I'll probably do a breakdown of that process at some point, but it's so nichey. A lot of people don't end up needing to do pairing matrices, but maybe that's interesting to some of you out there. All right. Anyway, guys, thanks again for watching. Thanks for your patience with me getting these videos out. I'm happy to talk about them. I hope they're still interesting for you guys. Hopefully with some of the new ones. My plan for the next tournament is to Jonas and I are going to do a table talk about his prep for it, but since he didn't actually end up making it to the tournament, I want to see if I can get Tom, Nick, and Henry to do a four-person and on-screen conversation about the one-dayer experience we had in Belgium, which is really lovely. So that's what you can look forward to coming soon. A reminder, feel free to like, share, and subscribe, all that good stuff. Let us know in the comments below and in the Discord what you think of this kind of video and just any kind of comments you have in general. Come join us in the Discord. We always like growing that community as well. All right, guys, in the meantime, Ryan out.